Everyone, and welcome to the ATPCO 101 webinar. My name is Shelley Younger, and I'm the Manager of Settlement Services here at ARC. We're very excited to partner with ATPCO to bring the introduction to fare filing to our agents and carriers. I would like to give a warm welcome to our presenter, Sharon Ferrier, training specialist and subject matter expert in the marketing division of ATPCO. Sharon brings over 20 years in the airline industry experience and knowledge to this webinar. She's a Washington-based classroom instructor and subject matter expert on multiple ATPCO products and industry processes. She's been with ATPCO 18 years with positions in product development, core business, and product training. Sharon's area of expertise are ATPCO specialty products such as baggage allowance and charges, automated reissues and refunds, negotiated fares, reservation booking designators, data application and processing, particularly in the area of automated rules. Wow, that's a lot, Sharon. Before we get started, I have a few things to share. All participants will be muted throughout the entire presentation. However, you will be able to ask questions at any time during the presentation by going to the right side of your screen to the questions area, and you can type in your question there. We'll most likely take most of the questions at the end of the presentation, but there may be a few that I ask Sharon in the middle. And not to worry, if we don't get to all the questions, we'll be sending out a Q&A along with the presentation to address everything that was asked. One last thing is make sure you have your screen in full screen settings so that you can see the entire presentation. Now I'm going to turn it over to Sharon to get started. Welcome, Sharon.
Thank you, and hello, everybody. So today we're going to discuss an overview of ATPCO. In our agenda, we're looking at the role that we play in the fare filing process, as well as the pricing process, and some of the terminology that we use that is unique, the structure of our data, and some of the details within that data, and of course, any questions. ATPCO started in 1965 as an independent company. Before then, we were actually part of the Air Transportation Association of America, issuing paper filings for tariff. And the basis of what we do, the main core, is that the data airlines send for you to do pricing every day of a fare, we collect that data in a standard format for airlines, and then we send that to pricing systems. This is systems like Amadeus and Sabre, Travelport, etc., and internet companies. Basically, the airlines formed they on our board, and they manage what we do and what we develop, and that whole idea is to allow an airline to avoid doing things independently on their own and very costly. So we're doing a consolidated effort here for the airlines on their behalf. Everything we do is distributed to the pricing systems for pricing commercial travel for airlines. Hope you can hear me. Basically, in addition to the reason we were founded, our mission really is to lead the industry in defining standards. So in pricing, if an airline is putting out a fare with a restriction, that restriction and that fare should get processed the same way in each pricing system. So that collection and distribution is the core to be sent out reliably and efficiently. We do this every hour of an airline's data. Everything goes out electronically from our database to the pricing system. And any development that we do is done on behalf of an airline to reduce distribution costs and protect revenue for them. So it's maybe a product that could increase revenue, like a tax product that we put out, or baggage that is the latest. So what, as a solution provider, we standardize formats so everybody has the same data sent to a subscriber. They don't have different formats. And each subscriber that receives this data is loading it and then putting it out in the marketplace in their system. And we send this data as well to governments. Some data has to be approved by a particular government, so we do that as well on behalf of an airline. And then we guide development in the industry and establish standard best practices. So this would mean a pricing system and an airline meeting. So we do this with the industry. We have discussions, and everybody has an agreed to standard that they will use the data in a particular way in their pricing. And any solutions we develop is done collaborative. Now, the whole goal really for an airline to use ATPCO is so they avoid having to individually send data to different agents and or airlines. So all airlines' data comes into the database we have, and then we distribute that data to the pricing systems, who then, as an agent, you're using that data for pricing. So it's a central process. And we're the neutral party, so we represent the airline and the pricing system. In looking at what data we provide, the start began with U.S.-Canada fares only. So we represented U.S. fares and Canadian fares. And then we progressed through the years. We started in 1979 with international fares. And over the years, we've created different products to support the needs of the airlines. And more importantly today for a travel agent and an airline is automating reissues and refunds, having corporate contracts automated. So the automated process is key for carriers, because that is where systems that have agreed to process our data a particular way, that as a neutral party, we can resolve any pricing issues if it's a carrier-related one or a system-related one. So our different products through the years, we're going to look into now, see how we play in the role for fare filing. Now, in the globe, we have in the middle here, you can see that most of our carriers are based in Europe, Africa, Middle East section. So this is showing where the number of carriers we have data for, and then vendors, these are non-carrier related, like pricing systems, etc. And what we offer in our product portfolio, this begins where we have 4 different quadrants. In the first one, it's the collection of data, where systems are available for airlines to put fare and what we call fare-related data. This would be the rule restrictions, any booking exceptions, and taxes, etc., that they have exceptions for. And then the distribution quadrant, this is the people that purchase that input data, it gets sent to, again, subscribers that are like Amadeus, Travelport, etc. And then in the revenue accounting process, we offer different products for them to be able to do an audit, if you will, of did this price correctly, and there are different tools that can help them to manage and decide if they need to create a change in their data. The analysis portion is, again, a suite of tools that provide comparisons and analysis from year over year in a market for a particular carrier against carrier, for example. Are they being competitive? And the cycle just continues. The biggest part is the data collection. So we look at what happens within the pricing process. The key here that we wanted to advise is that in automation, to avoid any debit memos, within a pricing like Amadeus affair, if it's fully automated, it stands in the system as a guarantee. Of services, baggage, etc., that it is a guarantee factor. And it sounds really simple, but really the variables involved and all the different restrictions, like advanced purchase, etc., what path of travel has to be taken on that fare. Avoiding a debit memo is choosing the automated process.
Sharon, this is Shelley.
Hi.
Can I interrupt? Hi. Can I interrupt you to ask a quick question?
Of course.
Somebody wants to know what does GFS mean in analytics?
This is a presentation to governments that we do and a packaging of data. Basically, everything is put into a different application in our database, and so a fare would be standalone. The restrictions for that fare are in another system, and the packaging of it is done in the government process, where it may need to be sent to government, so we put the pieces together, so it's complete.
Okay, can you, so what does GFS stand for?
It stands for Government Filing System.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. So basically in the filing process, when a carrier is sending out a fare, the restrictions associated with that are numerous. And anything you do today, if it's automated, it's guaranteed, but if not, it could be subject to a debit memo in any manual processes. So we are looking at standards that everyone has agreed to, the airlines have and the pricing systems have. And what we have created, because we have these standard formats that data goes in and then out from our database, that we have established in pricing standards documentation that a pricing system uses to interpret what airlines have put into our database. For interpretation, this could be, for example, a 5-day advance purchase. How should they measure that, and how do they get that to automate in their system? So that coordination requires regular meetings between all the pricing systems and airlines. This we call a working group. When we create something new or there's an interpretation or a problem with automated data, we call it a living document because sometimes we need to do a change in what happens with pricing of a data element, and that we maintain. And the standard setting of that data is definitive. So this is expecting to have the same result whether you're pricing a Sabre, Amadeus, Expedia, it doesn't matter. Everybody has agreed this process of those data elements are to be done consistently. I've got a question that somebody sent about what is PIPS. So put that slide in our 4 quadrants of what we do. And PIPS is an acronym that we use for proration, correct? It's proration that a GDS can access historically and see what has happened on a fare when it may have been changed in our database and establish what should or should not be prorated as a fare when sharing revenue amongst airlines. So a single fare that gets published, an airline will, if they become part of that travel, interlining with another carrier, that they expect a standard revenue to come out of their portion. And we file data like that on behalf of IATA as well airlines. So that is what we call PIPS.
Thank you, Sharon. Also, Sharon, we're getting a number of questions, so I don't want to break your flow of things. So I think I am going to wait till the end to ask them, but I just thought I'd let you know we've got a number of questions coming in, so that's good.
Great. Okay. I know ATPCO has a lot of terminology that we use, and amongst airlines and systems, we try to have the same language, if you will, but it's in technical terms. So, for example, in Geographic, we have a look at this where the globe is divided in 3 major sections. This is following IATA standards for housing data, if you will, in our database. That showing with subgroupings within a particular area. So you see North America at the top in what we refer to as Area 1 geographically. So North America has a lot of subset groupings of geographic, and they're by number. We call them zones. So these zones, North America, it would include US, Canada, Mexico, for example. So an airline that is intending to distribute any data, we have this geographic established not just for restrictions that they wish to establish. They can go narrow down to an origin destination, for example. They could have a large grouping geographically to cover many origin destinations. So geographic is really important for airlines in the data, followed by what we call tariff groupings. This geographic further gets placed by product in our database, and fares products, for example here, will exist under an acronym, TAFP, for example. This is termed transatlantic fares that are public. And that description really geographically is a fare that goes in or out of the United States from anywhere. And then we have a requirement in this Geographic that they are crossing the Atlantic. So if a carrier wishes to have a fare in this particular Geographic, if you will, first they have to be flying over the Atlantic to publish this fare. If they want to fly over the Pacific, that gets housed in a different tariff. So it's more in our database an organization to make it simple for pricing systems to find data. The rule that is IPRA, this stands for International Passenger Rules over the Atlantic. Now, fare and a rule in two separate tariffs, but they're a family and they're linked together in our database. So even though they're separate input applications, they're merged together. Right. As far as data goes, most of you may be familiar with public data. This is just fares you can retrieve out of the system, and everybody sees those. Everybody gets to use them, and they actually, in certain markets, get presented to government for approval. So an airline selling in a particular country may require approval first before they could even publish that fare. In others, we have governments that are online with us and view an airline's fares data and make an action on it. Then we have what we call private data. Private data is what we have special security in our system that we send only to particular GDS pricing systems that only a particular travel agent can access. So the view and the sell of that data may not necessarily be by the airline themselves. So we have a lot of data that airlines put in that an agent only gets to see. They don't see that themselves. It just becomes too much data. But that's normally done when you have consolidated corporate contracts, things of that nature. So there's a lot of public data, but more private. In looking at a little bit of the data structure of what goes into our system in pricing, we have a fare, and that fare is an origin destination. It has an amount, and that fare itself is associated to some restrictions, rules. Every fare has to have some restrictions in our database, whether it's an assumption from data or whether it is actual real restriction that the airlines put out. Followed by what we call footnotes that are travel based on miles. They don't
Sharon, this is Shelley. Unfortunately, we lost audio with you for about a minute.
Okay.
So you may want to go back and repeat what you said for probably the last minute or so.
Okay. When we have a look at the slide of data structure, can you hear me?
Yes, now we can hear you. Thank you.
Okay. So we have in our system fares that have an origin, destination, and an amount, which indicate if they're one-way and round trip. As well, every fare in our system will have an associated rule that has conditions of how this fare can be used in pricing. And some of them may have a footnote that restricts sell and travel periods. We have booking codes that are used for bookings. Traveling under a routing, an airline may have a particular map that they wish that fare to be flown a particular way. Then we have what we call itinerary type data that would, after pricing, be used to impose any YQ or YR taxes. If an airline wished to impose a ticketing fee for a credit card transaction, or, for example, generating a ticket in a GDS costs them money, so they may want to impose that onto the passenger. And then other itinerary type elements include baggage, any ancillaries, what we refer to as onboard, lounge, unaccompanied minor. There's a host of different offerings an airline can put out that can apply on a particular itinerary for a passenger. And we also have a tax product. The tax product is what we'll look at at the end. Or having a look at our next slide. We have in fares, specified fares. These are put into the database by a carrier by origin and destination. And an airline averagely files between 20 and 100 per origin destination. And then we have what we call constructed fares that are where an add-on has been added to that fare to serve minor markets that the carrier doesn't necessarily sell that often. And this is what they look like in our database. A fare, if you look under this, has a tariff for an airline with country down to the actual origin destination and what rule that is associated with in our database. A fare class, whether it's a one-way or a return, and the amount. With, if there's a routing attached, it all will be indicated. So the raw data that goes in as a fare has other components that we won't be looking at, but just as a high level here. The rule associated with that fare is the one that has the most complexity. So we'd look at reissues in here, security, surcharging, a lot of things. Basically, in pricing, it starts out with a fare in a particular origin destination, and then it goes through categories, restrictions. This is what we call the rule. Category topics. This could be a surcharge. It could be a penalty category. Each one is individual. And then any booking exceptions, those get processed from pricing. So we have a look at how fare is associated with what we call a fare class. A fare class is the code that you end up with on the ticket as a fare basis. So the fare class starts out, goes through in pricing each restriction, including generic restrictions that we call general rules. A carrier may have something always applicable for a child discount, for example. And then what appears on the ticket after it's gone through automation, it could include a ticket designated. That's what we call the fare basis for the ticket. So this rule structure has a host of categories that are all housed with a numeric and a description of what that could be. So daytime restrictions, that's a category 2. All these different categories can be used or not on one fare. So the name that associates with a category you'll see in text form. An RBD is a little different. This reservation booking designator that we show here is relayed to a carrier's seat map. So you see the seat map, first class cabin, they could have different inventory. So the inventory control per airline is fluctuating with different letters. Each different letter is associated with maybe complete different tier of pay amount. So R may be the highest tier, most expensive, unrestricted, and the A the lowest in business. You have different codes. So we manage this for airlines in what we call a Chart 1 and a Chart 2. And the key here for them is that if they interline, they need to be able to book a particular inventory on an airline. And this data we manage, and each airline will process against in pricing what comes back to book as the letter for that fare. We look at a little high level at some of these categories. Negotiated fares, which I think many agents are familiar with. This has the ability for airline to indicate who can sell that, if you could mark that fare up, if you could redistribute it. They can state the commission associated on that fare and dictate what goes on the ticket. The negotiated types of fares that exist, they would be either considered net, what the airline gets, or as selling, which is what the passenger pays. But this is a contracted fare, so it's not a standard published fare that would be in the database. So they're creating these other types of fares, and that generally is private. Followed from making a negotiated fare, we offer airlines a dynamic creation where out of all the fares that exist in the database, they can retrieve and do calculations against those fares. For corporates, for example, they may say, every fare I have, you get 20% off. And instead of creating additional fares in our system, they're using this category to do permutations. So they can do calculations and create fares as well in different markets, what we call zonal. So these could be multiple origin destination cities. They can create for themselves mileage-based fares based on how far travel occurs. This would be the amount. So it's one of the most widely used categories by airlines. Automated reissues, the biggest one that is a time-saving factor for airlines, and this is where in a reissue, instead of doing a manual process, the category will dictate how a reissue can occur, what new fare can be used in a replacement, what fee to charge, if they have waiver policies, no-show policies that are different from other reissues. It's less than 3 minutes to process, and we have automated refunds for airlines. This is taking off widely in the industry. So the refunding process is voluntary. This is indicating who, if a refund can occur, how a partially tickets should be repriced because it goes through a repricing process in order to return a refund. What that fare may have a penalty on the refund. They may waive it for certain conditions. So this automated process is going to be something you hope to use. If you're not, it eliminates, as I said, a lot of the manual processes that don't get it correct. In looking at itinerary type elements, we have the carrier tax that they wish to impose, called YQYR, a ticket fee if they wish to impose that on the passenger, and branded fares. This is a new view for fares, showing not just your lowest priceable fare, but looking at different varied options that a passenger could have. Optional services, where they provide ancillary offerings, as well any baggage-related data, and taxes. So these itinerary-based elements, we'll look at some of the examples where in branding today, an airline is just organizing the fare into a product that they geographically wish to say, I'm looking at the Visit South America grouping of fares, for example, and geographically they're advertising what goes with a high fare, what goes with a cheap fare. So for an example, this is going to be the display. You've got different displays per pricing system, or carrier website, but the idea is they've chosen which fares belong in the discount, which belong in the basic, and as they sell them out, all the complexity is hidden behind the scenes. But the idea being that if I wanted that basic fare, I could see in transparency what came with it. Did I get a free bag? Did I have to pay for a pre-reserved seat, etc.? So the branding lets a comparison be done from one level to another. If I got classic, I might get a pre-reserved seat and not have to pay for it. So maybe I should pick that because that with the free bag is cheaper than if I did the basic and had to pay for the bag and pay for everything else. So this branding and optional service offerings work together, where within a brand they can say, you get the free seat, you have the meal, the lounge, and other offerings. We call these ancillary services in ATPCO, and then we, in ancillary, also allow for merchandise and overriding reissue refund rules, which today are not really used in the industry, but they are available. And we offer 5 different baggage service types: allowance that goes on the ticket, what gets charged as excess, and if it can be prepaid. It's all designed to be compliant with IATA rules for bags processing and the U.S. and Canadian government regulations for bags, of how they should be used, how data should be used, these standards. So as an example of an optional service, we show in this case a voucher that is offered on board, mileage accrual, etc. Anything an airline wishes to display in a brand of what goes with that fare in addition to the rule restrictions. As far as taxes go, initially pricing systems housed taxes in their database, and they got that data from IATA. And then carriers would make exceptions for taxes all the time, and they had to constantly go back and forth and check and verify, oh, should it be like this in Sabre? Oh, should it be like that in Amadeus? Because they may have an exception in Amadeus they never had told Sabre about. So the pricing systems asked us to develop a central tax database that everybody has the same exact tax used in pricing. This is government taxes that could include VAT taxes on an itinerary. So we have been working with the industry and pricing systems to replace their tax database with this ATPCO tax central database. Everybody should have the exact same results then from pricing. And any questions? I know we're getting short on time, but I'm happy to go.
Sharon, this is Shelley. We have probably, to be honest, more questions than we'll ever be able to get through. But let's try to do our best. And for those on the phone, any questions that we don't get to live, I will work with Sharon behind the scenes to get the answer and get the answers out to everyone. So Sharon, hold on to your seat. You're going to have a few questions coming your way.
Great. Okay, I see that we have
okay.
a question about the difference between fare class and fare basis.
Yes.
Okay, fare class is what exists in our database as attached to a fare, and that fare class is what is used to go through the rule restrictions to match up. The fare class itself may appear on the ticket, but if it got to be modified in any way from the start of what it was. So if I had a Y fare class in the database and that Y fare class ends up appearing on the ticket as Y/IT, it didn't start out as a Y/IT. It always existed only as a Y. So carriers go back and verify the Y fare for pricing if they're doing an audit, but the result that goes on the ticket, the Y/IT, is the modification of the fare class.
Okay, thank you. So the next question, does ATPCO offer subscriptions to agencies to view a carrier's general tariff rules?
We do. We provide data. It's purchased by a pricing system, a revenue accounting system. It could be an airline that subscribes to the data. Agencies can, yes, it's the raw data. However, there's different options that can be provided. For example, some airlines would purchase just YQYR data and not be interested in anything else, but we do offer that. But for travel agents, if they just wanted to view data in our database, they would not have that ability.
Okay, so if they just wanted to go in and view, that ability is not really there. The possibility of purchasing the raw data is available, but obviously there's a cost to that.
Correct. Now, as far as viewing in our database, there is an ability to get what we call access, a sign-in to our system, but there's a lot of paperwork involved for a travel agent to be able to see only certain things, for example, because there's access levels, and I think I'd have to verify with our legal department on what they may be offered as access to see. But there are other products that we have as a pay-for service to view certain data. Because it's airline data, it's protected and confidential, so we can verify and come back to you.
Okay, yeah, let's touch base after the webinar, and we can send out any information that you find out or any links that may help an agency look into what's available with ATPCO. Okay, so the next question. Let's see, can you please explain the major difference between Category 25 and Category 35?
Yes, Category 35 is a negotiated fare that has either a net or a selling level that an airline puts out. As far as security, who can see it, that is stated inside of the Category 35. That's the key part of being a negotiated fare. Whereas a fare by rule dynamically creates fares, and those fares could already be a negotiated fare. It could be a public fare just sitting in the database. So a fare by rule dynamically creates other fares, whereas a negotiated fare is an existing fare and specifies who can sell that and what level it is, it's net or selling.
Okay, can you automated pricing a little bit more?
In automation, we have established standards that airlines should they've agreed with systems. The pricing process starts always with just a fare that's in the database that goes through all category conditions, and any restriction that comes out from that category is processed in the pricing based on matching, failing a fare, coming out and saying, you know, you're trying to price a fare and you can't get it to price, and you have a look at the conditions and you see, oh, it's only for Monday travel. Oh, got to book that on a Monday instead. So your pricing process is the most complex part, and there's so many components to it, not just the restrictions, but there are also what is the RBD to be used when, for example, booking a fare. You might have Washington, New York, London, and the coupon Washington, New York is economy only, but you're selling a business fare, Washington, London. The passenger is sitting in the business cabin between New York and London, but they're in economy between Washington and New York. The fare itself has to have just one RBD attached when it's filed in our database. Exceptions are found in the pricing process when it goes through and retrieves what should be applied in mixed cabins, etc. That pricing process, systems go through all of the data, and it's pretty amazing if you think about it. This is done in seconds.
That is very true. It is amazing. So next up is when agents see very confusing wording or maybe some type of duplicate wording in rule displays, who's the best person to contact to help get something like that corrected?
It's actually the airline that they should be telling to correct it. Basically what that is an airline has a very specific condition they attach inside of a fare in a particular, like let's say children discounts. So they go inside and they put it's a 75% child discount. But then they also have what we call general rules. And those general rules are what you're seeing as a double display. They haven't inhibited the general rule from coming forward. They've allowed both sets of data to do a display. But in pricing, there are safeguards. If it's an automated pricing, so the general rule might show 67% for the child, and the rule is showing 75%. And you're like, why would I see two child discount amounts? That is where the source of data has been pulled in. In pricing, though, if it's an automated pricing, it's a hierarchy of what's supposed to happen in pricing systems. And we say that whatever the condition is in the rule for discounts at least, that they only use what the rule states, not the general rule overriding, or you able to try to manipulate to get the general rule. It's inhibited in the pricing process, but not in the display.
Thanks, Sharon. So in the end, the best thing for them to do if they see discrepancies or confusing wording is to reach out to the airline directly.
Correct, because it's their data.
Okay.
ATPCO, if we get things like this from other airlines about another carrier's data, or from a pricing system about the carrier's data, it's the same. We can contact the carrier, but as an agent, they would probably be more receptive to change than if we just said, people don't like how this looks. They might just
no.
say, I don't want to do anything about it.
Definitely understandable. It's always seems nicer to hear from the customer. Change tends to happen in that regard.
Yeah.
The next question is it's kind of a two-parter. What are the current FCMI codes and their values, and are these standard in all GDSs?
Can you repeat the question? I'm sorry, the FC code or what?
What are the current FCMI codes, the fare calculation mode indicator codes, and their values, and are these standard across all GDSs?
As far as fare calculation goes, this is ticketing. So IATA has set standards for ticketing in what should appear in a fare calculation. And the GDS are programmed with fare construction rules that they have to abide by as far as what IATA sets as standards in what should appear. So at ATPCO, we're not the authority about the ticketing standards. IATA would be. And actually, it could be found in the IATA ticketing handbook manual, because it's outside of ATPCO. The GDS have to incorporate these things, rules, if you will, of ticketing from IATA. Same with EMD. We don't have any part of what should appear in an EMD and what it should look like.
Okay. I can also say that each GDS does have a listing of their FCMI codes internally within that GDS and what they mean. And I get an updated listing every so often. They have specifically asked ARC not to publish their FCMI codes out to agents. They want the agent to go directly to the GDS. But I could probably kind of hook you up with a copy, and also I would ask you to reach out to your GDS to make sure that you get access to the most up-to-date version of the FCMI code. So next question is, why does it take such a long time for carriers and a particular GDS to come to an agreement over Category 16 and Category 31?
Actually, Category 16 doesn't have anything to do with reissuing and refunding. It's informational text for an agent. It shouldn't conflict with what happens in the automated process. However, for a carrier and a GDS, it's first off carrier data, but GDS have to process the automated category, which is the one that still today has some outstanding industry standard settings that haven't been agreed to, but for the most part it is. I don't know if that helps with the question, but between carrier and GDS, we're an intermediary if they have any pricing concerns.
Okay, thank you. We have a question here from a carrier. Can you clarify the U.S. ticket tax process and who advises ATPCO and the GDSs? So who actually does this process?
It starts with IATA. IATA is the keeper of government taxes. An airline may initiate that because of a government. So a country where they have been advised they now need to charge a particular tax that hasn't been charged before, they would contact IATA, and then IATA sends that as the official tax to ATPCO, and then we put that in the tax database. So it's
okay.
By a carrier, it could start there through IATA though. If there's an exception, a carrier wants to say, I don't wish to charge this many taxes or that particular tax I'm absorbing, that is a carrier exception to the government tax. It still gets taxed out of the process, but who eats that or not, those carrier exceptions come directly to ATPCO.
Okay, thank you. Well, Sharon, we really have, literally we probably have 25 or 30 more questions, but we're coming to the end of our time. I hope you don't mind, but behind the scenes, maybe you and I can get together and come up with the answers, and we'll get those out to the community here, if that's okay with you.
Right, definitely.
Well, it seems like we should have had a little bit longer given the number of questions we have, so we'll take that into consideration in the future. This concludes our presentation today, and we really want to thank you for joining us for this extremely informative webinar. And thank you to those who sent in the questions, and we're sorry that we weren't able to get to a number of them, but we will commit to getting an answer to you. We know your time is valuable, and we really appreciate your participation. And Sharon, thank you so much for your time and energy spent on this and answering the questions. And for those on the phone, look for webinars to come, and we hope you have a wonderful day.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.